This is a follow-on video to the setup video, part 1. So this is part 2. This is how to use Accordance Bible software to open up resources and do some tool manipulation with those resources. So we're going to start out here. We have brought up Accordance. We have a blank screen. Notice the toolbar here. I showed you how to make that toolbar appear. We come over to Window, and if you don't see the toolbar, come down. This should say Show Toolbar, so I'll hide it. So if you don't see the toolbar, click on Window, come down, and then click on Show Toolbar, and you'll see the toolbar here. So over here, second from the left, you'll see this button. If I hover over it, it says Library. If I click on this button, it will show me some recently opened resources. Then it will show me texts, and then various other types of resources: dictionaries, commentaries, lexicons, Greek, Hebrew lexicons, grammars. I don't typically keep this open, partly because of the space that it uses up, and partly because I can open everything up using the New tab. I will click on New tab. Notice that everything is nicely categorized. Now, if you see just a total random list alphabetized of all the resources, then you need to go and you need to order these the way that I showed in the last video. And the link for that is in the description below. So the first thing I'm going to look for here is the textbook and the workbook. So come down here under Grammar, and I'm going to come down through my various options to Pratico Van Pelt Hebrew Grammar, 3rd edition. I'm going to click that, and that's going to bring up the grammar. Looks like it comes back to where I was before. And so here is the grammar. I can make it larger by coming over here up near the top left here and clicking the bigger A. I keep clicking that, it becomes bigger. And to get rid of this resource, I just come up to the tab that's been created and I click the X. You would open the workbook the same way, come down to Grammars, and then Pratico Van Pelt Hebrew Workbook. That's going to open that up, and you can make that larger if you want. So wherever I left off here was in chapter 8. So again, I'll X out of that one. And now I'm going to come and look at a Hebrew text. So we're going to take a look at the Hebrew text and pick BHS Hebrew Apparatus ETC BC. If you don't see that, then go ahead and pick Hebrew Bible Biblia Hebraica tagged. You should have been able to download this one on the bottom. If not, the Hebrew Bible is fine for this class. So go ahead and click one of those. The last time I was here, I was in the book of Psalms, Psalm 1. And this window comes up, so just get rid of that. I never use that. Just X that. I can make the font bigger by clicking the large A. I can make it smaller by clicking the small a, but it's already pretty small. So I'm going to make it big enough so I can see pretty well. And then the next thing to do is come over here to add parallels on the other side. And I'll click that, and it will have a list of recent ones. But if you don't have anything there, just come down to texts, and then you'll see this window of all the texts appear. It might appear on the right, but it's on the left here. And choose ESV with Strong's. Once that comes up, I can make it larger by clicking on the big A. And I can also size the window relatively by clicking on this margin and then dragging it whichever way I want. And then as I hover over a word, I can see that the corresponding word highlights in the English. Now sometimes you will hover over a word and it won't have a corresponding English word, and that's the way a translation works. Sometimes the ESV won't have a corresponding word. And similarly, sometimes you'll hover over an English word in the ESV side and it won't have a corresponding Hebrew word. But for the most part, when you see a Hebrew word, it will have a corresponding English word, and if you see a English word, it will have a corresponding Hebrew word. So that can be useful. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to turn on instant details. So you see this button up here in the toolbar, that's a rectangle with a lightning bolt in it. That's your instant details. Click that, and notice then that an area shows up at the bottom where whenever I hover over a word, information shows up in that region. So I'm hovering over this word chafetz here, and at the bottom, it's giving me information about that word. And as I hover over different words, the information down there changes. This instant details window should appear at the bottom, but it can alternately appear at the right. So this button over here at the right that says switch to vertical orientation, if I hover over it, if I click that, then my instant details will appear over here on the right-hand side. But I prefer them to be at the bottom, so I'm going to come and switch it back to horizontal orientation, because over on the right-hand side, this is where lexicons and other information can appear. So I prefer having the instant details down at the bottom. Now, if I want to copy that information, I hover over the word that I want, and then I hit the Shift key, and then I can move my cursor down to the area at the bottom, and then I click this clipboard, copy instant details. So I click that, and I've copied the instant details. Now, as an option, another option, I can hover over a word and then click on the word for about half a second, and the instant details appear right below the word. And they'll stay there until I click somewhere else outside of that, and it will go away. So click on the word. Got to get it to click without highlighting a letter here. So click on the word. There we go. And the instant details appear. And then I can come over here and copy the instant details by clicking on this clipboard. Now, in order to paste that information, I can come over to a Word file and I can paste it. So I just hit Control V, and the information gets pasted into my Word file. And so here's the instant detail information. You've got the actual word that's in Psalm 1, or wherever you're looking. Then you next have the lexical entry. So this is the base word. So you have Rishaim, which is wicked ones. And then you have Rasha, which is the lexical form. And then it tells you it's an adjective, and then it gives you the parsing, masculine, plural, and it's an absolute. We'll learn what absolute and construct are later in the class. Then it gives you some what we call gloss definitions, guilty, wicked, or wicked person. Note that if in your instant details, you also see this German information. So German, schuldig, Frevler, you need to go and set that option that I talked about in the previous video under Edit, Preferences, Instant Details. Over on the bottom right, you're going to want to turn on the Suppress German option. It's not a big deal, but this is not something that you need. Now in context, the word that you're looking at might mean one of these, or it might be a nuance that's different depending on how wide of a semantic range that the word has. Then down here we have the Strong's number, it's 87563, and then it mentions that this is the ESV, and here's the ESV equivalent, which is wicked. So the ESV translates this word as wicked. So that's what the instant details are telling us. Now, depending on what you have set for instant details, we went through this in the previous video, but if I come to Edit and Preferences and come down to Instant Details, as I mentioned, I don't set English transliteration, but if you set English transliteration and then click OK. Then when you get the instant details for a word, you're going to see the English transliteration here, Rishaim. And so if I copy that information, my clipboard, and then come over to my Word file and paste it in, notice that it's got that extra information. Rishaim for the word itself, Rasha for the lexical form. The rest of the information is the same. So once you've learned how to read Hebrew, the transliteration is not all that important. But you may, if you have that option set, you may see the transliteration. All right, now the next thing that we're going to go and look at is how to open up a lexicon entry for a word. So here's the word ish, man. We have ha-ish, which is the man. And so we have ish is man. Notice that when I highlight the word, it only shows the word itself. When I highlight here, this is the definite article. And it's, even though it's attached, it's a different word. The tool is only highlighting the actual word that we're looking at. So now I'm going to do a triple click. Why this isn't a double click, I have no idea. But they want you to triple click. So 1, 2, 3. Triple clicking can be a pain sometimes. 1, 2, 3. There we go. I finally got it to work. I did it pretty quickly. It brings up a lexicon entry for the Concise Dictionary of Classical Hebrew, and it brings this one up because in my preferences, I set this to be my triple click default. And so we set that up before in the previous video, but under Edit, Preferences, General, you set the triple click default to Concise Dictionary of Classical Hebrew, and then that's what comes up when you triple click. And so we have this entry. I can resize this. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller by clicking and dragging. I have the lexicon entry for ish. Notice the first definition, man, person, and then next one, each or anyone, and then a second definition, one or someone, and a third one is more particularly a man or a husband. And you can go down through the various options. There's a lot of different meanings of this word. And so when you see the base definition as man, well, it might mean man, but it might mean a number of other things depending on context. So remember that context determines meaning. And the lexicon then also gives you a lot of important information, like here's a place where the sense each and any one, this be sense, is used in Genesis 11:2. Here's a verse where the meaning husband appears in Exodus 35:22. And so the lexicon is very, very valuable tool because it tells you not only what the meanings are, but gives you examples of where words in different verses have that meaning. So this is an extremely valuable tool. The last thing to note here is that I can open up multiple resources at once. Let's say I want to open up the grammar and still have the Hebrew text open. I can come over to the new tab, as we did before, or I can just come over, now that I have a tab open, I can come over to this plus, which is next to it, and that will open up the same menu. And I can come down to grammars, and then I'll open up the Hebrew grammar. And that will be under this new tab that's created. So I can switch back and forth between my resources by just clicking on the tabs. And over on the right-hand side, I can also open up added resources over here if I want to open up, for instance, a different lexicon. So those are options that are open to me. I can have multiple resources up, and each one will bring up a tab. So I can even, at this point, I could bring up the workbook. So I can have all three of those resources up simultaneously. Make this a little bit bigger. So I can have the workbook, I can have the grammar, I can have the Hebrew text, and whatever other resources that I want to have open. So this is a quick introduction to how to use Accordance Bible software to open up resources and to do some simple lexicon lookups.